I'm Michael Fox, and this is the Prospector Podcast. And I have joining me regular Prospector contributor Ted J Butler. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always good to get a little bit of a follow-up when you've done an article for the Prospector News. And you did an interesting piece in the May edition, which is now available out on the website for those that haven't downloaded it yet. But it's talking about the Panama Canal, which has popped up in the news a lot lately. And there's been lots of things happening in around there. So let's you bring us up to speed with Panama in 2025.
Sure. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Basically, a couple of months ago, BlackRock basically tried to acquire the Panama Canal, or certainly a couple of parts of it. I do suspect, after doing my analysis, that Trump was involved in the plans and strategy to acquire the ports. But it hasn't gone through just yet. It would have been for $22 billion. It wouldn't have just been the Panama Canal. The deal would have been to acquire 43 ports globally from the port operator CK Hutchinson, which is based in Hong Kong. And essentially, the deal has stalled after being almost green-lighted. And it's stalled for a range of reasons, really, and it comes down to the China-US trade war that's ongoing and has many broader implications. Everybody knows that Trump's been imposing tariffs, and it's become known as Taco Trump, always chickens out, where he places these tariffs, says he's going to do it, doesn't do it, then he's going to do it again. And just today, as you know, Mike, Trump says that China has totally violated the Geneva deal with the US on tariffs. So, in short, the deal is stalled, but it would have been a huge coup for the US if it would have gone through, and it would have been basically a reversal of what we've seen in the last few years in Panama, which is increasing Chinese influence. We see this in the exports. In 2018, the US was by far the biggest export partner of Panama, with close to 2 billion compared to China's 25 million, I believe it was, very, very low. And in 2023, that's completely flipped. And China has 1.5 billion is responsible for Panamanian exports, and the US is a fraction of that, maybe about 20% of it. So during the Biden administration, the US basically fell asleep at the wheel in Panama, and Trump has tried to capitalize on that. And it's not sure which way it's going to go just yet, Mike.
No, now you say the deal has kind of gotten hung up. Now the ports that are being talked about to be purchased is a Hong Kong-based company. Is it the Chinese authorities that are blocking the deal? Is it Panamanian authorities blocking the deal? Or is it somebody else altogether?
It's a mix of both. So there's obviously the Panamanian authorities themselves. They own the rights to the canal. Simply, CK Hutchinson was leasing the ability to operate in these two canal spots in Panama. But it's actually Panama's Comptroller General who's basically quite furious, really, saying that 1.3 billion was left on the table for CK Hutchinson. It's filing a lawsuit against officials who authorized the renewal of CK Hutchinson's 25-year port concession all those years ago. And ultimately, it's more complex than just Panama. And Fink himself, the CEO of BlackRock, admitted this. The deal is being reviewed as one transaction. So if China's market regulator can prove illegality in any of these 43 ports, the entire deal will be off. So at this point, I would actually say there's a higher probability that the deal won't go through. And that will be a crushing blow to the US's foreign policy and Trump's image, which is fragile, as we know, especially because the US is so reliant on the Panama Canal for a large proportion of its trade. I think it's something very, very high. It's like 40% of the entire trade that passes through the Panama Canal belongs to the US. So that's a huge, crucial choke point that the US would lose its influence over if they're not able to tip the scales the other way.
Yeah, it becomes a strategic issue at that point in time. This almost seems like, we're facing right now, and we have been since the first Trump administration, a global trade war. Essentially, Trump started with the tariffs on China and Trump 1.0, and it's continuing on and escalating it with Trump 2.0. Is this really the front line, maybe the Panama Canal of the Belt and Road Initiative that China implements in order to exercise their economic power in the world, versus, we refer to it as the Donrow Doctrine, which is, Donald Trump's version of the Monroe Doctrine, and that everything in our hemisphere is our business type of methodology. Is this where the front lines of that battle are being drawn, right here in Panama over the Panama Canal?
Totally, Mike. Panama became a member of China's Belt and Road Initiative back in 2017. Subsequently, the country welcomed President Xi Jinping for a state visit in 2018. At that point, China leapfrogged the US to become Panama's top export partner by 2020. And then more recently, in response to this, we've seen Mark Rubio, the US Secretary of State, on a state visit to Panama, putting his foot down in February, basically saying that, essentially coercing Panama into exiting the Belt and Road Initiative, and they did that. So it seems that Trump's the Donrow Doctrine is succeeding at this point in terms of its influence over Panama. Obviously, Panama is of huge military importance to the US as well. So there's no doubt that there were threats there of an increased military presence to protect, in inverted commas, the Panamanian people. Of course, there have been some protests in the country in response to this, and the sort of revival of colonialism, if you like, a protest against that. But yeah, Mike, it really is the front lines of the battle, and there are still other things going on in Panama that Trump is displeased with, and certainly the construction of this fourth bridge near the Panama Canal. The BBC reported through satellite photos taken on March 2024 and January 2025 that there has still been progress in this fourth bridge. And China are the ones who are supposedly behind that construction. They also implemented safe city surveillance technology in Panama during that period where they were, and they still are, the biggest export partner. So it's really a fragile situation. The US needs to do something to, like I say, tip the balance of China's influence in Panama. Otherwise, it faces a serious constraints on its ability, on its supply chains, and that crucial point in Central America.
Now, how important is the Panama Canal to the rest of South America? We talk about the goods that are going to flow in and out of the United States, but it's also crucial for these other countries for their goods flowing out of their countries into other markets. Does it matter to those countries if it's run by China or if it's run by the US, or is this strictly a US-China issue?
Yeah, well, there's a very small percentage of traffic that goes through the Panama Canal that is from the rest of South America. Most of it's from the US, quite a considerable amount from Brazil, but nothing compared to the level of the US. The most stark graphic that I've seen in my career, really, and one of the most stark, is the largest trade partner in South America in 2000 compared to today. In 2000, it was the US in pretty much every single Latin American country. Nowadays, it's simply one or two. Ecuador and Colombia, I think, are the ones that are still the US, and all the other Latin American countries now trade with China as the top trade partner. So, with that being said, I think probably would benefit Panama in order to align with its other South American allies, may prefer to have Chinese influence in the canal, but I do feel that they are stuck between a rock and a hard place, the Panamanian government, because whoever they choose, it's kind of they face the wrath of the opposing side. If they choose China, Trump will be upset and will probably threaten to leverage the U.S. military. And if the U.S. intends to if they decide to side with the U.S., China will no doubt try to maybe cancel infrastructure projects, that this completion of the fourth bridge. They may even take further measures in other areas. So it's a tough one for Panama, but it's important that the US do something to change the situation.
Yeah, that would be, although even if China does own the Panama Canal effectively by controlling the ports on either end of it, it would be foolhardy for them to claim block off the Panama Canal, because that would put them in direct conflict with U.S. military efforts, and that's not likely to end well for either side.
Correct. And I think actually, I think it's Panama who still owns the canal. I think this idea that Trump's been peddling that China owns the canal is not true. It's simply, like I say, that CK Hutchinson, the Hong Kong-based company, has been leasing the ports in order to operate. And really, up to now, it's operated quite poorly in terms of a profitability stance. The share price up until the deal was tentatively announced a couple of months ago was very poor. It'd been really poor. And that's why really Larry Fink has eyed this deal up as a way for him to please Donald Trump in the White House. And of course, they go back a long way, their relationship. Larry did a great job for me, is what Donald Trump said back in 2017. He said he managed a lot of my money, and I have to tell you, he got me great returns last year. So there's a historical relationship there, and there's a lot of reasons why that point towards the fact that maybe this deal was agreed upon in the months prior to Trump even entering office. This was premeditated. This was choreographed, at least the nuts and bolts of the deal, over a year before Trump even came into office. If you look at the actual people involved in and the companies involved in the acquisition of these two ports and the broader 43 ports, BlackRock's prior investment activity with Trump's interest suggests the deal was premeditated. For example, one of the two partners in BlackRock's consortium was Global Infrastructure Partners. And BlackRock also announced that it would be acquiring Global Infrastructure Partners back in January 2024, before going on to make the acquisition official on October the 1st. So the second partner as well, Terminal Investment Limited, known as TIL, was also involved in the deal. TIL was already owned 20% by Global Infrastructure Partners. However, since BlackRock acquired Global Infrastructure Partners, it now holds 20% of TIL. And in doing so, it's joined the Mediterranean Shipping Company, which is a huge company in itself, which owns 70% of TIL. So there's a lot of different entities in bed together, and a lot of deals that were agreed upon and acquisitions that occurred prior to this Panama deal even coming about. And some people might call it, uncanny deal-making ability. Some might say that it's simply genius from Larry Fink, but others might be more cynical and sort of alleged collusion. And that's something I guess we'll have to wonder.
Yeah, that's a possibility, but Larry Fink isn't about to do a deal just for the sake of doing a deal. There has to be a profit motive in it for him. And as you said, if the ports are poorly run, a more efficient operator can improve the profitability and therefore the value of the asset that Larry Fink is buying, essentially. So looking at this deal, then those other two partners, are they going to be the actual operators and BlackRock the owner?
There's going to be a mix of interest. We don't know at this point the exact allocation of who will own which ports, but we know that those three entities are going to be involved. You would assume with 10 trillion assets under management that BlackRock would be the majority shareholder, and that's what I would assume. But these are the shipping companies: Mediterranean Shipping Company, Global Infrastructure Partners, and TIL. They're all big companies in their own right. For example, the Mediterranean Shipping Company overtook Maersk, the Danish rival, to become the world's largest shipping container line in 2022. And there's a Swiss-Italian billionaire that's operating that too. But this is something that we've seen before from BlackRock. This is not something that's irregular from Larry Fink. I actually wrote my dissertation on Larry Fink back in my university days, looking at the acquisitions of Barclays' BGI division back in the 2008 global financial crisis. And it was a similar sharkish M&A move, you know. It was capturing the asset management wing of Barclays when it was weak. They got it for a great price, and they've grown since then, and they continue to make these acquisitions, these strategic acquisitions. And but I suppose it's besides the point, Mike, why the deal is happening and Larry Fink's motivations. We understand he's a profit-seeking guy, like you say, and of course he's going to try and suck up to the US president because that's where his company's based. He actually did that back in February, reneging on all the DEI initiatives and all this ESG stuff that he's kind of pushed to the side after being incredibly bullish on ESG for years and being the pioneer of the term. But since Trump expressed his kind of disdain for this type of sustainability ideas, Fink has suddenly followed suit. So he goes whichever way the wind blows, I feel, Larry Fink.
Yeah, well, it's the old Ferengi laws of acquisition. War's good for profits, but so is peace. So, yeah, Larry Fink will bend to whichever direction the profits lead him. Is it a possibility that this deal gets broken down so it's all about the Panama Canal and not about the other, the other, I guess 39 ports, is it, out of the 43 that are outside of the Panama Canal?
Yeah, so there's two in the Panama Canal. I think there's 41 elsewhere, and I think there's there's 5 or 6 in the Suez Canal. There's some actually over in Asia as well that probably could sort of near China and Hong Kong that may be within China's reach or to kind of challenge or at least contest. And that's what they're trying to do now with their regulatory body. So, like I say, for those reasons, Mike, I think there's less chance that this deal's going to happen. What it means for US-China relations more broadly, I think it's just kind of complementary to what I feel is an inevitable ongoing escalation in the tensions. Trump will not accept a deal or will not propose a deal unless it is disproportionately beneficial to the US. And China won't accept that. Xi Jinping won't accept that. So I think what we're going to continuously see, Mike, is regardless of what happens with the Panama Canal, Trump and Xi may continue to meet in Switzerland. They may continue to be mediated by these neutral countries of the UAE, Saudi Arabia, but we're going to continue to see them butt heads. And I don't believe there will be a trade deal agreed for a long time. And I think that signals more pain for both economies and perhaps a global slowdown that would reverberate across the world.
So let's be pessimistic. This deal falls apart. We go back to where we are today. What does that mean for trade, the trade routes, and South America?
Great question. I think initially, I suppose you look at where China have been investing with the Shanghai port in Peru. In terms of South America, I think you would probably see China double down on South America. There'd be a continued war for the resources of South America, especially that copper belt along the coast in Chile and Peru. So that would certainly happen. I think there's certain countries that the US has more influence in than others, but then you look at Venezuela recently. I think Chevron just got booted out because Maduro is more aligned with, I suppose, Chinese and Russian principles and those administrations. Latin America is always complicated. It's always going to be volatile, and there's always going to be incentives at play on both sides. But certainly, like I say, Mike, with that graphic that I was just outlining earlier, that if if the US doesn't change its policy response in Latin America, China will continue to grow in dominance. And I don't see that Trump is going to suddenly revert to this kind of soft power diplomacy. It's completely against the personality that he is. He's more likely to go back to this Donrow doctrine, bully his way into these countries. But if they've got the choice between infrastructure investments from China or military presence in inverted commas from the US, they're going to choose China every day of the week because it's investment in their country. And it's the same for Africa as well, as we've talked about before, Mike. China really dominates in Africa as well. So the whole global south is China's to lose at this point.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to know where the battle lines are being drawn, and we'll have to keep an eye on what's going on in the Panama Canal. It's, go figure that after decades of being a secure trade route, we would find ourselves looking at it as a flashpoint.
You wouldn't think so, would you? I mean, that's that century ago when it was built. Obviously, it's shrouded in controversy and there's different claims to ownership but ultimately I don't think it's going to suddenly come to a standstill, the Panama Canal. I think it's still going to be operational. I just think it's going to become a chess piece in a broader trade war, and it's going to be a continuous tit for tat until Trump ultimately leaves office.
Yeah, well, it's I guess it's moved up in scope of power. It's no longer a pawn. It might be a knight or a bishop now.
I think so. I think that'd be a good characterization.
Okay, wonderful. I will put the link to your article in the description of this podcast. And if people want to follow your musings, Ted, where they best find out what you're writing about and talking about?
Sure. Ted J Butler on LinkedIn is the best place to find me. TedJButler.com is my website as well, so feel free to check that out. Little shameless plug, we just released the In Gold We Trust report. Ronnie Stoffler, one of my mentors and the author of that report for 19 years now, that came out a couple of weeks ago, contains everything you need to know about gold. I wrote the silver chapter this year, and if you're interested in silver, it would be a great piece to feast your eyes upon.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was going to say that's the second year you've written the silver chapter for Ronnie's book, and it's a shameless plug, but it's a worthwhile shameless plug. It's a well-written piece that comes out annually.
Yeah, and 450 pages as well, Mike, this year. So it's a Bible.
It's just it's a good read. It's beyond the bathroom read, that's for sure.
Correct. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for taking the time out for this, and I look forward to your next piece in our July issue coming up in a couple months' time.
Thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure.
The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.